Welcome back to On Texas Football. I am Jeff Howe along with Gerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel. Time for this week's edition of the Recruiting Breakdown. Official visits already being lined up. We've got that. We've got updates on prospects in-state and out-of-state. But, Gerry, before we go any further, let's thank our long-running sponsor of the Recruiting Breakdown. That's our good friend Mark Saunders.
Texas alum Mark Saunders. When it comes to protecting all your stuff, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects all of it? All of it, I say. Here's some good news. Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders serves the Austin and Round Rock area and the entire state of Texas. That means he's the only insurance agent you'll need. Everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, and an ATV if you got one of those. Call Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders' office today. 512-218-8571. Our On Texas Football guarantee, which we rarely make, but we will in this instance, you'll be in great hands with the more than 35 years of experience that Texas alum Mark Saunders brings to the table. Again, give him a call today, 512-218-8571.
Gerry, there's been a certain way Steve Sarkisian and company have handled official visits since this calendar got moved up to where it's June official visits is going to be the big month. What's the big change, though, you've noticed in how Texas is lining these visits up?
Yeah, they're definitely making a move to getting more top guys on campus early in June. Because in recent years, when we've kind of laid out the official visit, it's been a Georgia that attacks the first 2 weekends in June and doesn't attack the last 2 weekends in June as much, where Texas was the opposite, not attacking, and 1 year maybe not even having an official visitor that first week in June. And they all say for the last 2 weekends in June, Sark. And that fits to his recruiting profile late and stays on these guys, right? There is a change this year. We're already at 3 official visitors the first weekend in June. So that is a change. And it is one of those guys is Peyton Miller, one of the top center prospect on the board for Texas, and a commitment, and a couple of other guys that are targets. So we're definitely seeing a shift here from Steve Sarkisian this year. And that doesn't mean he's not going to recruit late and stay on those top targets all the way. But there is a different approach right now for these June official visits than previous years, as we're going to talk about. They actually have official visitors right now scheduled every weekend in June. We have never seen that in February before.
CJ, Gerry mentioned that first weekend starting June 5th, Peyton Miller, the interior offensive lineman out of Anna, Jeremiah Douglas, the Crandall wide receiver, and then Cameron Hall out of Mansfield Summit already committed to Texas. What stands out to you right now? I know it's only 3 visitors, but it's 3 pretty big names coming in that first weekend.
Well, yeah, and all 3 from the in-state. I think that is one of the more telling signs for me. It's interesting because a year ago, Texas hosted 17 prospects that final week. 10 of them were already committed. So it was basically, hey, go through your other visits if you want, and then that final visit will be, hey, you're supposed to be here. You committed here for a reason, or you see all these other commits and, well, this is the place for you, right? So it was a big recruiting weekend towards the back end. Now let's see what it's like, because I'm assuming if you take 3 or 4 weekend trips in a row, things get pretty taxing. So to get out in front of the official visit month, I think is a smart move for Texas. And then, of course, you can always host some of your more in-state guys towards the back end as well, who maybe take a 2 or 3 hour drive down to campus as well. So that's going to be interesting how they filter in all of the out-of-state visitors. And there's going to be plenty. Again, Texas very active in Florida, Georgia, Alabama. We're going to be talking about a few prospects, obviously, from California here in a minute as well. But getting the in-state kids both on campus early and at the back end, it's going to be really interesting to see how the rest of the dominoes fall throughout the month of June.
By the way, Jeff, I think what CJ said there is really astute, because look, the process is fun until it gets exhausting for parents.
Yeah,
traveling every weekend for a month. And I think the other thing is, I think we're seeing a different attack in NIL now. Get your NIL deal done, sign your deal, and you're done with the process earlier. So I think it's a combination of that. I think, look, but what CJ said, I think has we talk to parents. I mean, when we're out at Austin Airport and whatnot, and late in June, the parents are like, we're exhausted. This is an exhausting process. I mean, we have lives too. We're having to miss work multiple days. I mean, there's something to that. So I definitely think that's part of it. And then I think there's a more aggressive push nowadays, and I think it causes Texas to react to these NIL deals getting done, and then you're done with your process. That's a more aggressive approach that's happening in NIL from an NIL standpoint right now with Texas's competition.
CJ, Gerry brings up a really good point that I think is worth talking about. I don't know, we've talked a ton on the recruiting breakdown about it, but throughout the fall, we saw Oklahoma, Texas A&M, a lot of schools that Texas recruits against being pretty aggressive early on with the 27s. And we talked about, hey, Texas might have some ground to make up. Do you like what the staff has done to put themselves in a position to close some of these recruitments during June?
Yeah, I do. And again, I feel like this is a similar track as what we've seen the last 2 years. Texas now with more commitments as of February 10th than either of the past 2 cycles, right? So they're moving quicker in that regard. And I think, of course, you have to when you start seeing how quickly a lot of these official visits are being set, how many of them are taking place, right? We're seeing some officials in March, whenever the dead period concludes as well. So schools are, I guess, fast tracking the typical recruiting schedule. And as a result, you don't want to be left behind. And I think Texas has done a fine job of making sure that they get the guys that they want in the class to start. And then, of course, continuing the big game hunt moving into June and beyond. But before anything else, making sure that you at least have a strong baseline of guys in your class that you can build around, I think is something that is commendable by the staff and the way that they've approached 2026.
Hey, Jeff, I forgot to mention when CJ, when we were talking about that first weekend, I want to mention Jeremiah Douglas from Crandall, because he is not a name that many Texas fans are familiar with. I went by the school this season around the Texas OU game. After the game, the next few days to see Jeremiah Douglas, a wide receiver. He's a Vanderbilt commitment. Now, Chris Jackson's been through that school as much as possible per NCAA rules. Texas is like Jeremiah Douglas. He's a good kickoff returner as well as wide receiver. They're at Crandall, one of the growing schools southeast of Dallas. But Texas likes Jeremiah Douglas quite a bit. And when he put out on Monday that he was officially visiting Texas, that was kind of newsworthy because he didn't show up for Texas Junior Day, January 17th, and he's been committed to Vanderbilt. So that adds another wide receiver to our board once again, because after he committed to Vanderbilt, I know Texas still went by there, but there was still kind of wondering, okay, is he actually going to visit any other places? Well, that, especially after he didn't show up for Junior Day. Well, that question's now been answered.
Yeah, CJ, looking at wide receiver, because it's worth mentioning that Easton Royal already has his official visit locked in for June as well. And with Jeremiah Douglas coming in, what do you think the wide receiver number looks like? Because I think, how many high school wide receivers do you take in a class now? That's something we talked a lot about in the 26 cycle. What do you think it looks like in the 27 cycle?
I still think 3 is kind of that magic number that you'll continue to see at Texas. And again, that leaves you, the opportunity to keep depth in the room, but also room to go add a big portal piece should you need one, right? And Texas has done that plenty of times since Sarkisian and staff have adopted this approach to the portal. But 3 makes sense. And what do those 3 look like? Well, we're continuing to see kind of a move towards the bigger body, right? Bryson Thrower. Gerry, I know that you've mentioned a couple times, this is the top guy on the board for the Longhorns. He's 6'3", maybe in some change, right? Jeremiah Douglas, another guy with a big frame, big catch radius. And, of course, Easton Royal, maybe not that big frame, but blazing speed. So it's a combination of the 2, but also leaves you plenty of options and room to go out there and find yourself a guy out of the portal should you continue to see attrition at wide receiver. And we've all talked about it. Wide receivers in the portal, it's the healthiest position for a reason. There's plenty of talent out there. And I think 3, again, is kind of where you'll see the baseline moving forward.
Gerry, I want to go back to the first weekend really quick. And, you don't have to power rank Peyton Miller in terms of where he ranks in terms of the Texas board or your personal board. But a guy that Texas has been on for, it seems like years now, they've been on him. But prospects, Gerry, they increase their value. Guys that either are high school centers or have the legitimate ability to play center. Those guys, in terms of their value, they shoot up really quick because there aren't as many of those guys as you think.
Yeah, no, and Peyton Miller he is rising with colleges because he's shown the ability to play center this year, this past season. And his offensive line coaching, offensive coordinator, just took a head coaching job, was a former center at Missouri and played in the Big 12, obviously, and was very smart to put him at center and let him start developing and showing some of that as a junior in high school. And I think that accelerated him with some colleges because they've seen him snap on tape. They've seen him make calls on tape. They can now call that his former offensive coordinator and offensive line coach and say, okay, let's talk about Peyton and his football IQ and what you saw from him at center. So it's an easier evaluation on Peyton as a center, but to your point, his versatility also, while we list him as a center and he is Texas top center prospect, he played everywhere at the Under Armour practice we were at. CJ and I were at. He lined literally up at, I don't even think he lined up at center when we were there, but he lined up at a guard spot and a tackle spot. And he still plays some tackle for Anna as well. But that versatility, I think, is something else that really helps Peyton Miller.
CJ, I know you wanted to talk about some out-of-state prospects. You got a pretty meaty update over on ontexasfootball.com Tuesday morning. So you mentioned some in-state prospects, but there's a couple of out-of-state prospects that are on the board too.
Yeah, first I think we need to talk about Honor Fa'alevi Johnson coming in from the San Diego prospect, top 40, top 30 player in the entire country. He's one of the fastest players in the country, a defensive back as well. I mean, you turn on the tape and all you see is a blur. So really talented prospect. He right now is expected to visit Texas March 28th. And Gerry, I know that we've also talked behind the scenes of what some of those big visit dates will be when the dead period concludes. March 28th might be one of those, but I wanted to mention as well, Will Muschamp actually stopped by Johnson's high school in January 15th to be exact. He earned his Texas offer back in May of 2025. So he's been on the radar for a long while. He has upwards of 45 offers at the moment as well, planning to be on campus towards the back end of March. Two other prospects from the out-of-state. The first is Buford linebacker Joshua Eccles, planning to visit Texas in March once again. 6 foot, 210-pound linebacker, 110 tackles, an interception, blocked punt in 2025 for a really talented Buford defense. And then, of course, going over to Donovan Moore, top 75 defensive lineman in the class of 2027 out of Hueyton, Alabama. His top 6, pretty darn good. Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, LSU, Ohio State, and the Longhorns. He tells OTF that he plans to be on campus in March as well. Auburn, at the moment, perceived to be the team out front, but we'll see what Kenny Baker and Will Muschamp can do with this one.
And let's point out, Jeff and CJ, I think we have a pretty good handle now on 2 big visit weekends during spring practice for Texas. March 28th, that's a Saturday, spring game April 18th. So we can put that one out there. I mean, Honor Fa'alevi Johnson is one of the top prospects on the board, period, for Texas. And they're working to get him in on the 28th. He won't be the only guy. So obviously through spring practice, there'll be some guys trickle through, maybe from in-state that show up for a day. But I think when you're looking at your weekend, big visit weekends, I think we're looking at the 28th and then April 18th. And by the way, I have a little bone to pick with the Sark real quick. The official visit dates aren't lining up for me for one reason. June 12th through 14th, Monterey Jackson, the corner from Lakeview Centennial, is going to be on campus. And then the 19th through 21st, Easton Royal is going to be on campus. What if they wanted to race and they didn't race on the track? I'm sensing an official visit weekend issue there. We could have had a super fast official visit weekend if both those guys could have raced on the football field in the 40 or something, because those are two of the faster juniors in America in the 100 meters. So I got a little bit of a conflict there with the official visit scheduling. I'll just put that out there.
Gerry, you brought something up that I do think is worth mentioning, because we got asked about it a lot last year. And honestly, I don't know if it was good, bad, or indifferent, but the fact that you actually have a spring game where we don't know the format, but fans will be in the stands. It'll be a different atmosphere, different vibe than it was last year. Does this have any impact, you think, on recruiting?
Look, I think it can. I mean, so much is transactional now with the top prospects, right? But I do think there's an element of, especially if you can get an out-of-state kid on campus for a spring game. Remember, Brandon Baker's first visit to Texas was a spring game visit. And there's a number of others, I'm sure CJ, Jeff, y'all can reference that were the same way. But I do think that's kind of a show for a blue blood in football. When kids can look, especially if they're from areas that aren't that way. I mean, if you're a West Coast kid, how many people would go to a UCLA spring game, right? I mean, there's a difference if you fly out to Texas and you see 40, 50,000 in the stands. And by the way, I'm interested to see if these spring game numbers reach 60 or 70 this year, because everybody knows it's Arch's last spring game at Texas, more than likely, his only spring game at Texas, and a chance to look at Cam Coleman, Rasheem Biles, some of these guys. This is kind of a first for Texas fans since there was no spring game last year. I wonder if this spring game number creeps up pretty high this year.
Yeah.
And that can be impressive to out-of-state kids. And that always was impressive. And Nick Saban used it to his advantage, the A-Day experience, when they'd have 80,000 in the stands. That is still a recruiting advantage because kids want to go to winners and they want to go to places that really support football. That's an unbelievable football environment in a great conference. I think Texas has a chance to run the numbers up for the spring game pretty high. So if you can get some out-of-state guys on campus, especially if it's maybe their first visit, you have a chance to kind of wow kids and ensure you get that June OV.
If I can add to that, right, how important will those big visits in the spring be for a lot of out-of-state kids? Texas, I'm sure, will open up the gates once more to NFL players to return. And, Jeff, I know that we talked about it a little bit yesterday, how deep Texas now is when it comes to players in the NFL, how it's a big marketing tool to, go from the combine to the draft, and now the Super Bowl is filled with Longhorns as well. Well, we've seen over the last 2 weeks, Jordan Whittington has returned with a Rams jersey to put up on the wall. Jahdae Barron was on campus over the weekend with a Broncos jersey to put up on the wall. Who else kind of creeps back onto the 40 acres during these visit weekends where kids can say, okay, I watched them on Sundays. Now I'm seeing them back at Texas. That could be me as well. We'll see. But I like the trend of what we're seeing with former Longhorns returning from their NFL days back to Austin.
And by the way, if we want to throw out another potential visit weekend for Texas Relays is the weekend of April 4th. So that's that. Falave Johnson comes in March 28th. Then you have Texas Relays that following weekend, 2 weeks before the spring game.
No doubt. Gerry, before we go any further, one more time, let's give a big shout out to our long-running sponsor here on the Recruiting Breakdown, our good friend Mark Saunders.
Yeah, Mark Saunders, he can protect all your stuff. He serves the Austin and Round Rock area and the entire state of Texas. Everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, and ATV. Call Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. Who's better for all your insurance needs as a Texas fan than a Texas alum? That's Mark Saunders. Again, 512-218-8571.
Gerry, I want to wrap up with this because CJ mentioned, he and I did a video for the channel on Monday about just the impact Texas is having in the NFL right now. It's something we haven't seen in a long time. And you mentioned it's going to be Arch's last spring. And Gerry, I know recruiting, as you said, it is more transactional than ever. But if you're Sark, if you're somebody inside that organization, how do you maximize the hype, the buzz, the exposure that you've got right now? Because this isn't something you get very often.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. Obviously, there'll be a bunch of pros back if they can be for that spring game weekend. And if I was Texas, I'd be planning an event for those guys, honestly. I'd be trying to plan something big around that. But I'll say this too. The spring game, having a spring game, you know what that can really showcase? Who do kids know, other players? Tyler Atkinson, some of these freshman guys that are going to be on the field for the spring game. That other guys, like if you're recruiting Josh Dobson, the corner out of South Carolina who just transferred to Huff High, well, you want to try to get him out spring game weekend around Samari Matthews. They train together. See Samari Matthews on the Texas field playing in a spring game. You want kids to be around players. And who do they know? They know the other recruits. They know, especially in the classes around them. So I think that is where spring games are valuable too. So kids can visually see guys they know on the field, and then they go and talk to that guy after the spring game. And if he's giving you, I love it here, this is a great decision, those things win, and they still win in a transactional recruiting world. And they win with parents, because here's the other thing. Parents talk to parents. And where will parents be? Watching their kids at the Texas spring game. And recruits will be there with their parents. So there's opportunities there as well for Texas. That's the value of a spring game, because it's like having an extra home game in recruiting.
Yeah.
And when the parents of recruits and the parents of players are in the same place, that's a golden opportunity in recruiting. You don't get as many of those nowadays.
CJ, you got the last word this week.
Man, it's tough when the recruiting breakdown comes and we're in the middle of a dead period, right?
Yeah.
And you sit here and you kind of talk about who's expected in the spring, who's taking official summer official visits, and it kind of gets you excited. But on top of that, spring football, I think will be big for all of the reasons that you mentioned above. In regards to Texas using parents to recruit parents or players to recruit players, look, areas recruit areas. And to add to that, Texas having a number of kids from New Orleans, from Louisiana. Obviously, Florida has been a place Texas had great success. Georgia as well, with Tyler Atkinson kind of being the headliner of that group, and Richard Wesley out in the West Coast. Texas has done a fine job with those big, key, important states where guys can look at and say, hey, the top player in my region, the top player, my county, my district, whatever, he's at Texas. Let me see what the buzz is all about. I'm sure we'll see more of that as well moving forward. But altogether, moving the timeline up is something I'm a big fan of for Texas. And we'll see how that kind of, how the dominoes may fall for all of those June official visit weekends as well.
Jeff, I'm gonna add one other recruiting piece in here. Expect to see Austin Gooseby start to pop up on mock drafts after 1 year. He's having that type of senior season in basketball. He is really, really playing at a high level. And he's gone from a guy that I thought would be a 2-year guy, most likely, to a guy which I'm not sure if he makes it past one now. If he makes shots, if he makes perimeter shots at the college level next year, like he's doing an OTE against really high-level competition, he may turn into a one and done.
Gerry, to that point, it's probably not a bad thing that Texas won a game against Ole Miss with Dalen Swain not playing well. Like maybe just keep that stock low enough to where he can come back to Texas one more year.
Yeah, I think if Dalen's a first rounder, that'll be it. It's going to be hard for him to come back. And I think he's on the fringe right now in scouts' minds.
No doubt. We'll continue to monitor that and monitor all the comings and goings and happenings and rumblings on the high school football recruiting trail as well. CJ, Gerry, thank you guys for the knowledge and expertise as always. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Just want to remind you to get over to ontexasfootball.com if you're not there already. I mentioned the work that CJ and Gerry are doing over there. Daily updates on the recruiting front. Any news, notes, and nuggets that we drop, it's going to be dropped there first. So make sure you're a member over to ontexasfootball.com. And make sure that you like this video and that you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way you're not missing any of our Longhorn coverage all year round. For Gerry, for CJ, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until next time, welcome.